ever notice how you come across somebody once in a while you shouldn't have messed with? That's me.
I am not an African American.
You're Oreo cookie, white in the inside and black on the outside.
I don't have an afro, I have an Amerifro.
Talking that idiotic stuff you talk about, I will slap you.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Black as the ace of spades, but 100% American.
Heard around the world by everybody and their mama. The Jesse Lee Peterson Radio Show.
Uniting the races with truth instead of dividing them with lies. We're also rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. It's Wednesday, third hour. Manhood Hour.
Man enough, big and bad enough. Are you gonna let them shoot you down when the evil flies? And
That's right.
Cries, are you gonna be around? Someone needs a friend.
Okay. Manhood Hour, folks. Rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. I have with me Stacy Patton, a reporter for the Chronicle of Higher Education and the author of the memoir, That Mean Old Yesterday. She's also the founder of Spare the Kids, an organization that advocates nonviolent discipline. Stacy, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
A little bit about your life. You were adopted, and apparently they were mean parents to you.
Yes, they were.
Were you adopted by black parents?
Yes, I was.
And so tell the folks some of the things that happened to you. I know they can read it in the book, but why do you say that they were mean adopted parents?
Well, my adoptive mother, I often describe her as a cross between Joan Crawford's Mommy Dearest and Sybil Dorset's mother. And my adoptive father was a Pentecostal minister. Their family was very, very religious, and they believed in not sparing the rod, as so many people like to say, but their form of rod was switches, belts, extension cords, wire hangers, their hands. And so they really drew on sort of primitive practices in order to raise me and teach me as a child growing up. And ultimately, the abuse got to the point where I ended up being taken out of their house by social services.
Wow. And were both parents really mean to you?
Well,
or one worse than the other?
Well, my adoptive father never put his hands on me, but he had a wooden spine. He was one of these black men from the Deep South who, he grew up in Mississippi during the 1940s and 50s, and, growing up in the Jim Crow South sometimes fostered a sense of deference in order to stay alive. So he never put his hands on me, but he was a peacemaker, somebody who didn't really stand up and protect me, from his abusive wife. So he never put his hands on me, but I hold him just as accountable for the abuse as his wife.
And how old were you when they adopted you?
I was 5 years old when I came to live with them, and then my adoption was legalized when I was 7 years old.
You write in your book that I guess you bought a gun or you got a gun some type of a way. You bought one. Mm-hmm. And you were going to find these folks, your adopted parents, and kill them.
Yes.
Why didn't you do it? What happened?
Because I forgot the bullet.
You forgot the bullet?
Yes.
For the gun?
For the gun.
And so
empty.
You were on your way to kill them, and you realized you didn't have any bullets.
Yes.
That's the only thing that stopped you.
That was the only thing that stopped me.
That's amazing.
In that moment, yes.
And so after that moment passed, or during that moment, you realized this is something you should not be doing?
Yes. I eventually turned back around and realized where I had found myself, and realized that all that anger and all the pain and the memories and the trauma had driven me to this point of murder. And I realized that I needed to free myself from that. And in order to free myself, I had to confront this past. I had to look at everything that had been done to me. I had to look at the sum of my experience, my stolen childhood, and also step into the context of my adoptive parents' own individual histories to try to explain why they parented me the way they did. And that led me to really look into African American history. And I was in graduate school at the time, and I started reading plantation narratives and studies on how black people were treated during the plantation experience and the violence and degradation that accompanied that, and then extend forward into the Jim Crow period and the Civil Rights era, and really see that black people have been traumatized, and it has driven us to embrace some very dysfunctional habits. And one of them is the way in which we too often treat our children. And so it wasn't until then that I, made sense of my own past by looking at the African American experience that I was able to really embrace what happened, confront it, and deal with it.
So are you over it now completely?
I wouldn't say I'm over it. I look at my face every single day, and I have scars from an extension cord etched onto my face. And I look at those scars every single day, and they are this kind of fleshy braille that reminds me of what happened to me. So I'll never be over it. I'll never forget it. And I will never forgive my adoptive parents for what they did to me.
You would never forgive them?
Never.
Why not?
I think that forgiveness is sometimes a weapon that gets used against victims and gets used against people of color especially.
You said that you will never forgive your adopted parents for the way that they treated you. What good is it doing you not to forgive them? What good is it doing you?
It's doing me a lot of good. It's allowed me to own my truth, to own the past. It's given me a right to say that I'm angry about what happened, to own that anger, to hold them accountable for what they did. That doesn't mean it has precluded me from understanding what led them to do what they did, but it doesn't excuse their actions. It's allowed me to heal and to be honest about my experiences, and it's given me the fire and the passion to speak on behalf of so many foster kids and abused children in this country, to advocate for them, to talk about the wrongness of what's going on without the fear of airing dirty laundry or people being embarrassed about what I've got to say about this thing.
But it's not making you free, though. It's not giving you peace.
It's given me plenty of peace.
But it's not. You can't have peace if you have unforgiveness in your heart.
Well, that's your definition of forgiveness. But that forgiveness is something that's deeply personal, and no one can tell you how to forgive or that you have to do it.
Well, you don't have to do it, of course. You can suffer the rest of your life, but you're never going to have peace until you can forgive them. It was wrong for the way that they treated you, but it's wrong for you to judge them or resent them for it because you would never find peace. Are you married with children?
No, I'm not married with children right now.
If you should get married and have children, you're going to end up treating your kids in the same manner that you were treated.
No, I doubt that very much. I work with children all the time. And I could never see myself raising my hand to a child. I've gotten lots of therapy over the years. A lot of times people cling to this notion of forgiveness, and it becomes a crutch, and it keeps them from doing the hard work of confronting what has happened to them. I usually tell people when the Jews forgive Hitler for the Holocaust, then maybe I'll take a moment and think about forgiving my adoptive parents.
Well, see, that type of thinking is due to your inability to see the right way to go because you're living a life of unforgiveness, so you're living in darkness, and the way you think is not clear.
I'm not living in darkness.
But the way you think,
I'm living an activist life. I've been very productive. I got my PhD last year. I'm a healthy, happy, vibrant person with healthy, loving relationships. I touch a lot of lives. So if that is the result of me not having forgiven, then, I'd like to see, the other side of that.
I want to get to
we agree to disagree on forgiveness.
I want to get to your article, but just FYI, you may not beat your kids in the way that you were beating, but you got to mess them up in another kind of a way, which still would be the same. They'll end up resenting you for it. You may spoil them, or you may overdo something or underdo it, but you're not going to see the right way to raise your children with an unforgiving heart. And because God would never forgive you if you don't forgive them. You're going to live in darkness.
As I said, we'll will, despite your predictions about what kind of mother I'll be, I will stop at that and say we agree to disagree on forgiveness.
All right, but remember I told you, okay? All right?
As I said, we agree to disagree on this.
Have you noticed that you mentioned how your mother whooped you and disciplined you, your foster mother or adopted mother, but your father, he didn't. I've noticed over the years that mothers tend to they tend to whoop you or raise their voices or impose some type of will upon their children in trying to discipline them. Why is it that they're more willful in disciplining the children than fathers are?
Well, some would argue that because the fathers aren't around.
But when the fathers are there, though?
Well, I don't know. I can only speak to my experiences and what I've seen in the families that I've worked with. But a lot of the disproportionate number of black children are coming into the world and are not growing up in two-parent households. And so that adds a lot of frustration to black women who are raising children on their own. Sometimes they, in their actions, their parenting strategies, they're doing things, especially with sons, that they think a father would do, to be really hard with the children. But a lot of it is frustration. A lot of it is having to carry the financial loads by themselves, the day-to-day by themselves. And so they're angry.
So it's possible that the authority to discipline children is not given to the mother, it's given to the father to do. That's why when a father can say something, it's more powerful than a belt can be, or a whip, or a tree branch. But when a mother says something to or give out instruction, the kids tend to ignore it because the authority is in the father and not the mother.
I think fathers are just as culpable in physical discipline of their children as mothers are. The child abuse statistics speak for themselves. That yes, a larger number of children are victimized by their mothers, but fathers still do employ the same kinds of tactics that the adults do.
Well, I know for a fact that fathers, with all being equal, are less likely to have to use a belt or whip in order
based on what evidence?
In order to discipline their children,
based on what evidence?
Where mothers tend to have to do that. Are you saying that cruelty and abuse was passed down from slavery?
I believe so. Yes. In my research. In my doctoral research, I wanted to understand the evolution of this kind of behavior. So I started looking at West African traditions and, looking at the historical evidence that, remains. And in West African traditions, from which, the majority of African Americans came from, there wasn't these types of practices like go and pick a switch off of a tree, beating children. They regarded children differently. They thought that children had certain kinds of, mystical powers. They were closer to the gods. They had a different kind of value attached to their lives. And so the Middle Passage experience, the theft of bodies from Africa, the horrors of, the slave ships, onto the plantation experience and Jim Crow, altered the ways in which we saw and valued our children. And slavery did not exist without violence and degradation and torture. And I started to see parallels in the ways in which modern-day black parents beat their kids and what was done to our ancestors on the plantation.
I have to say, I know that may sound good, but that's insane. That doesn't make any sense at all. So that's not going to help black Americans to overcome this issue by telling them that it was passed down from slavery. If black Americans had good fathers in their homes who loved what is right more than they did themselves or their wives, they would take authority of their families and you wouldn't see this type of thing happening. It's just that the black women are angry in that it's not in their nature to raise children alone because kids don't listen to mothers. Most kids don't listen to mothers after a certain age. And so they're trying to willfully make these children do what they think is right, and it's turning out wrong. And so this is why fathers need to take responsibility and discipline their children. The role of the mother is to tell the kids, if you don't do the right thing, I'm going to let your dad know. And the kids would most of the time do what's right, and you don't need to beat them to do it when you have that order working.
Well, I think there's value in confronting our history. I think part of what's our problem is that African Americans don't know our history, don't know where we came, don't understand how the trauma of racism, the trauma of slavery, the trauma of Jim Crow.
But that's crazy. That's not going to stop anything.
Continues to inform the way we see each other, the way we understand ourselves,
but see,
to understand the impact.
This is why
on our modern day family
This is why
structure.
I say you must forgive, because you're not seeing this situation in the right manner. Stacey, are you teaching these kids not to forgive?
I work with foster children and abused kids. These are children who are in the system.
Are you teaching them not to forgive?
May I please finish my
Because
sentence?
of time, we have about a minute and a half left.
Did you just say you're tired?
I said because of my time, the time here.
Okay.
Give me a quick yes or no, and then you can follow up. Are you teaching them not
to empower themselves, to be empowered?
Are you teaching them not to forgive?
I teach them to be empowered.
Are you teaching them to forgive?
And the communication skills they need to navigate and become productive, healthy adult folks who have a right to bodily and mental integrity.
Well, they're never going to have power until they forgive. So I hope that you have a change of heart about forgiveness so that you can be free, and then you can see how to guide them in the right way.
I'm very free.
Otherwise, they're going to grow up angry and out of control adults.
It seems to me you still need to continue your journey towards freedom, sir. Thanks
Stacey,
for having me on the show.
Thank you so much, and thanks for hanging in there. You better.
Of course.
All right, I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Okay. All right, folks. Have a good day.
The Jesse Lee Peterson Show, produced by Bond, Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. Views expressed by guests and callers on today's program may not necessarily represent the views of the station. For more information, call 1-800-411-BOND. That's 1-800-411-BOND. Or visit our website at bondinfo.org.